Good morning, thank you for joining and welcome to Efficiency for Access, ICF's and IEA's Hybrid Resilience Hub event, Building the Resilience of Smallholder Farmers Through Solar-Powered Agricultural Technologies. Could I have slide 1, please? Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping details. For our panelists participating virtually, if at any point during the proceedings you encounter sound difficulties, please let us know by dropping a message in the chat box and one of the Gigabox technical team members will address your question. In today's event, we will begin with a short scene-setting presentation that provides an overview of the topics we'll discuss today and introduce speakers. We will then go into a moderated panel discussion with our speakers for the next 30 to 40 minutes. Following this, we will open the floor for questions from our audience. The discussion will last about 1¼ hours, after which audience members will have an opportunity to mingle with speakers and ask questions directly. Slide 3, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. Before we start the discussion, I wanted to introduce the event co-hosts. Efficiency for Access is a global coalition working to promote high-performing appliances that enable access to clean energy for the world's poorest people. It is chaired by UK Aid and the IKEA Foundation. Next slide, please. The ICF Climate Centre offers compelling research and unique insights that combine climate science and predictive analytics to help organisations establish clear, practical pathways forward. Next slide, please. The IEA was founded in 1974 to promote member country energy security and has evolved into a global energy authority with an all fuels, all technologies approach and expertise. Next slide, please. Over the next hour, we will discuss how solar-powered agricultural technologies can help enable clean energy access for smallholder farmers and help them enhance their livelihoods and withstand external shocks such as economic crises and pandemics. Climate change is greatly affecting the livelihoods of smallholder farmers who produce a third of the world's food supply and mainly live in developing countries and small island states. Around 95% of farmland in sub-Saharan Africa and 60% in South Asia is rain-fed. This means that crop yields and livestock production are vulnerable to variable weather patterns and the rise of extreme weather events such as droughts and flooding. Affordable, high-performing and inclusive solar-powered appliances and technologies offer smallholder farmers a low-carbon pathway to agricultural productivity, helping them maintain their livelihoods and withstand external shocks. I'm really delighted to say that we have a fantastic panel of experts to discuss these topics with a breadth of amazing perspectives and a lot of different geographies represented. Joining us today, we have Jeffrey Prince, Head of Renewable Energy Portfolio, IKEA Foundation, Rebecca Mincy, Investment Director, Acumen Resilient Agriculture Fund, Priscilla Sani-Chimwele, CEO of WALA, Martin Veen, Head of Energy SNV, McKenna Areri, Manager Clean Energy Access, CLASP, Co-Secretariat Efficiency for Access, John Ehrman, Senior Partner at Meridian Institute, Project Director, Just Rural Transition, and Eduarda Zogby, Student Energy. And for those of you who've just tuned in, my name is Sarah Hambley. I'm Partnership and Communications Manager at Energy Saving Trust, Co-Secretariat Efficiency for Access. Now I'll just give a very brief introduction to my panelists. Jeffrey Prince is the Head of Renewable Energy at IKEA Foundation. He worked previously at the Dune Foundation for more than 11 years, funding, amongst other things, various renewable energy startups in India and East Africa. Rebecca Mincy is Investment Director at Acumen Resilient Agriculture Fund. She has developed a regional agriculture strategy and expanded portfolio that has already reached more than 5.4 smallholder farmers. Our next speaker is Priscilla Sani-Chimwele, founder and CEO of WALA, a social enterprise that specializes in the productive use of solar for agriculture. Our next speaker is Martin Veen, head of SNV's global energy team, involved in the design and implementation of energy access and market development programs of SNV globally. Our next speaker is McKenna Areri, manager, Clean Energy Access, CLASP, research lead, efficiency for access. McKenna manages research for CLASP's clean energy programs, primarily for efficiency for access, and its flagship program, Low Energy Inclusive Appliances, which is funded by UK Aid and the IKEA Foundation. Our following speaker is John Ehrman, a senior partner and co-founder of Meridian Institute. He is also project director for Just Rural Transition, which brings together food producers, governments, businesses, investors, civil society, and other stakeholders to champion equitable solutions to food systems challenges. Last but definitely not least, we're delighted to have Eduarda Zogby representing Student Energy. Over the last year, Eduarda served as an energy and gender consultant at Sustainable Energy for All, where she worked on electricity access policies and mainstreaming gender in energy projects to achieve SDG 7. And now onto our moderated panel discussion. Jeff, our first panelist. The IKEA Foundation is a hugely prominent funder of solar-powered technologies that enhance clean energy access for smallholder farmers, amongst other things. On the 2nd of November, there was an incredibly exciting announcement. IKEA Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, and Bezos Fund announced that they would be the founding partners of the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet, whose mission is to avoid billions of tons of greenhouse gases, extend clean energy to 1 billion people, and create tens of millions of green jobs. How do agricultural technologies fit into this platform?
Very, very prominently. Is the microphone on? It fits very prominently within the scope of the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet. Yeah, it's working. But first of all, I'd like to give a shout out to the folks at Energy Savings Trust and CLASS for organizing this, and also to FCDO UK Aid, because when we joined the Efficiency for Access Coalition a couple of years ago, it was actually through the openness of FCDO UK Aid that we joined the coalition. So if you're interested in joining the coalition, please reach out to Energy Savings Trust and CLASS. They're doing great work. I feel like a talking head because they do all the work. They know everything. But I represent IKEA Foundation. We try to bring money to really good initiatives like the Efficiency for Access Coalition. We're looking at prolonging our relationship to E4A, as it's abbreviated. And I lead the renewable energy team. It has funding in place to support things like this. We spend about 30 to 50 million euros in grant funding each year. We have long-term commitments of about 145 million. The Global Energy Alliance is additional to this work. So we parked 500 million US dollars in the Global Energy Alliance with Rockefeller and Bezos. We all chipped in equally. The idea is it should raise additional funding of about 10 billion to 20 billion. And one of the key pillars in that work is going to be productive use renewable energy technologies. So we'll look at standalone solar installations that enable jobs and livelihoods. Think of cold storage, solar water pumps, milling and processing. It's definitely work in progress. Not everything is set in stone. So the interesting thing is what we're trying to do is development is key, especially for those hit hardest by climate. At the same time, we have a climate mandate. So we think both climate and development can go together, hand in hand. Standalone productive use will be important, but we'll also look at larger systems. And there's also ambition to decommission coal, because let's be honest, we're part of an energy system any way we look at it. So if we go to a country, we can't just ignore the existing energy infrastructure at hand.
Thank you so much for that, Jeff. And now on to another speaker, Rebecca Mincy, Acumen. Rebecca, Acumen is a leading investor in productive use appliances. Could you please tell me about what you look for in an agricultural company to invest?
Sure, happily. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So we are equity investors. So that means that we seek to have an equity stake in your business. We usually invest anywhere between 1 and 3 million USD in any particular company. But what do we really look for before we actually write that check? From a technology standpoint, we really want to make sure that the technology works for low-income consumers. We want to make sure that it is sufficiently robust and it works in different environments. For example, does it work in a humid climate? Does it work in a area that, if you're working with an IoT solution, is there sufficient coverage there for the business model to work in those environments and to fully support the smallholder farmers that we're focusing on? So I think the technology is actually quite important. The other things that we're looking for are fairly standard, in fact, from an investment standpoint. We're looking for the commercials of the business. Is the business model quite solid? Does it, can you scale it? Are the financial metrics there, for example? When do you get to profitability? Those are some of the other things that we look for as we're making an investment. I think two other things that are worth highlighting is the quality of the team. We do look for teams that have a track record for execution, some domain expertise, and teams who really fully understand the customer. Are they tracking the customer journey? Do they understand the needs of the customer deeply? And are they building systems and processes and products that are well aligned with what that particular customer needs? And then finally, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we're looking for impact, specifically on across two dimensions. The first dimension is on what we call farmer well-being. Is the farmer better off as a result of having worked with this company or received this particular product? And so we're tracking incomes, we're tracking yields, we're tracking the challenges that smallholder farmers are having. And then the second area that we look at is climate resilience. Are farmers more resilient to changes in climate as a result of having worked with the companies that we invest in? We have a pre-screening tool that helps us to figure that out and to keep us honest. On the other side of investment, we track changes in climate resilience over time. So I would say climate resilience and impact, the quality of the team, the technology, and the commercials are the things that we focus on when we're looking at making an investment.
Thank you so much for that, Rebecca. Next, I want to go to Priscilla, CEO of Wala, a company that's won funding from the Efficiency for Access Research and Development Fund, which is funded by UK Aid and the IKEA Foundation and managed by Energy Saving Trust. And Wala won funding to develop a research and development project that is piloting a holistic support solution that will distribute high-quality solar irrigation equipment to smallholder farmers in Malawi. Priscilla, what have been some of the key takeaways?
Thanks, Sarah. So some of the key takeaways for us really revolve around the fact that solutions that involve low-income people are complex. It cannot be business as usual. So while as a social enterprise, and that means that we are for profit, but the model that we're implementing is meant to generate a positive social and environmental impact. So the social impact, the environmental impact, those are deliberate in our business model. And how our business model works is we sell solar-powered irrigation technologies to low-income farmers. But beyond that, we provide them with the support to be able to link to markets because this makes sure that they have the money to be able to pay off for the equipment, which we sell to them on credit. We offer them trainings on how to do farming as a business and how to do good agricultural practice and how to use and maintain the solar equipment. Because for most of these farmers, they're actually coming across this equipment for the first time and they need to be able to use it properly. We're also helping them access loans, or we're helping them access the equipment on credit. So we have a financing partner where the farmers are encouraged to open accounts to save. And over time, when they have reached a certain threshold, which is about 25% of the cost of the equipment, we loan them the equipment. And then we move with them throughout the season using these other two approaches that I have talked about, which is linking them to markets, which is offering them trainings so that they're able to actually use the equipment for the intended purpose. And what we have seen, some of the key takeaways for us, one of the major things is that funding is very important. You cannot do anything without money. And for us to do this, it is only possible because of the kind of support that we have received from the Efficiency for Access Research and Development Fund, from other partners like the EEP Africa, the IKEA Foundation, the UK Aid, which are funding the E4A R&D fund. And the reason why it's been possible for do this is that funding, because it's grant funding, gives us the room to pilot, to test a model which otherwise would be too high risk. The farmers that we deal with are very, very low income. They do not have the income to buy the equipment up front. And if we're not able to sell it to them on loan on credit because of the cost, because it's very high quality equipment, it means that they would not be able to afford this equipment at all. So on the one side, one of the key takeaways is that funding is very important, not just for startups, for social enterprises like Wala, which is what we're doing, but for us to be able to then trickle down, to then pass on that funding to farmers who are then able to buy this equipment on loan. It's on various levels. So funding is a very, very important issue. It's very, very important aspect. The other thing that we have learned is that it is important to build partnerships. And these partnerships can be win-win. It does not necessarily need to be one partner or one stakeholder winning everything. So there are various levels that I have talked about on the funding part. If we have access to grant funding, then we're able to pass on that funding to low-income farmers through loans to them. So we win and the farmers win, and institutions like the IKEA Foundation, E4A, you're able to achieve your impact metrics. The access to markets, we have partnerships with off-takers, and everybody wins in this case, because if we are able to identify a market for the farmers before the season begins, then the off-taker has an assured seller that they're able to find crops from. The farmer themselves has an assured market, and for us, we are assured that the farmer is able to sell the produce and actually generate the income they need to pay us for the equipment that we have loaned to them. The trainings, they generally impact and are beneficial for the farmer because they're able to come out with higher capacities. But at the end of the day, if the farmer is trained in how to do farming as a business, and if they're trained in how to use and maintain that equipment properly, we are assured that they're able to generate the income that they need to be able to pay for the equipment. So it's a high risk approach that we're able to take, because we then put together all of these other aspects that a social enterprise or a regular business rather would not be willing or would not be able to do. It is possible to do that if you look at it from a win-win perspective. And this is necessary because the kind of farmers, the kind of groups that we're dealing with are groups that we cannot continue to do business as usual. We need to think outside the box. And we're challenged to think further outside the box by building partnerships and bringing partners that complement the gaps in our model that we would not be able to fill on our own. And finally, we've learned that it's very, very important to innovate, to think outside of the box, like I keep saying. So the equipment that we sell is very, very high quality. It's equipment that is made by Lorenz. It's a German firm that normally designs solar pumps for high market, but they have designed a system that is targeting lower market. And the innovative thing about this system is that it is mobile. So what we're seeing is that this one pump is being used by more than one farmer. So we have on average between 4 and 5 farmers using the one pump. We have farmers that before they were using our pump, were taking a week to irrigate an acre of land because they are using traditional methods like a watering can. And now with the solar pump, they're taking 6 hours. And so that pump is being used by at least 5 or 6 different farmers, and they're using it on about 6 hectares of land, growing crops off season that they're able to then sell and generate additional income. And this has all been possible, again, I want to say, because of support that we're able to get through Efficiency for Access, through funding from the IKEA Foundation, through UK Aid, and through other partners like the EEP that are also funding us. So yeah, thanks, Sarah.
Thanks so much for that, Priscilla. I now want to come to Martin Veen of SNV. Martin, could you please share insights from SNV's experience working with IKEA Foundation, Energizing Development and other projects, supporting renewable energy applications and agricultural value chains with an aim to improve farmers' livelihoods and increase their resilience to climate change? Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Maybe for those who don't know SNV so much, SNV is an international development organization headquartered out of the Netherlands, but with most of our staff, 1,300 staff actually based in the countries where we work, and that's mostly Sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia. with a lot of local offices there, and really the local presence of SNV with more than 90% of our staff based there is I think also the added value what we bring to this space. We work on energy, on agriculture and wash. So for us to look at those nexus solutions between sectors, what we're discussing today, is actually quite a logical step. We work on energy solutions in our agriculture programs. So we have climate smart agriculture programs, for example, where we look at integration of renewable energy solutions in agriculture value chains. But we also have energy programs that started out of energy access, and where now productive use is really coming up as an important aspect, where we then obviously look also at how can we apply and build on our experience in the agriculture sector to look at those applications. We're very happy with the collaboration that we're starting with IKEA Foundation and NDEF in a new productive use of energy project, which is really about testing and validating business cases around irrigation, drying and cooling, specifically in horticulture and dairy value chains in Ethiopia, Uganda and Kenya. So it's quite specific. The interesting thing I think is that obviously you have different progress in different countries. Kenya is leading the way, has been leading the way on mobile money, pay-as-you-go for solar home systems, and building on that now also productive use solutions are really coming up quite strongly in a country like Kenya. Uganda as well, but to a bit of a lesser extent, and in Ethiopia a bit less. Every country has its own specific context. Now the interesting thing in a project like this that we have with IKEA Foundation and NDEF is that you can really learn from experiences in different countries. So we have the teams in the countries really connecting between each other, which is great, based on the lessons learned from Kenya. See on what can you really learn from that to replicate that in a country like Uganda and Ethiopia, but also the other way around. And we see a lot of interesting developments there. And I'm not sure how much time we have for discussion, but there's a lot to say on what we can learn in terms of what are actually the opportunities in this space currently, what are the challenges, how do we see that, how can we really get this to scale? I think there's a lot to say about that, but maybe that follow later in the discussion.
Thanks so much, Martin. Okay, so now I want to look at more of a research perspective. McKenna, on behalf of Efficiency for Access, you've conducted a lot of research on solar water pumps. Could you please speak about the key learnings from this research?
Thanks, Sarah. And you're right, we have conducted so much research on the technology itself, on the market for solar water pumps, on the potential impact, and also on the consumers. What do they want and how are they using solar water pumps? And one of the things that we're learning are that, solar water pumps have been around for so long. Since the 70s, we've had solar water pumps, but they're not scaling. And by our own measure, from our research, we see that we are only achieving about tens of thousands of solar water pumps being sold in sub-Saharan Africa, which is a shame because it's a perfect, almost a no-brainer environment for utilizing solar water pumps because of access to insulation and also the scarcity of surface water, for example. So despite a lot of how well solar water pumps apply in this region, they're just not scaling. But our research is showing that where they are being used, they are promoting resilience of smallholder farmers, who account for up to 80% of food production, for example, in sub-Saharan Africa. So a very important stakeholder group. They're allowing farmers to access groundwater, which, as the climate is changing and surface water is becoming less and less accessible, this is really important to maintain crop yields and also to kind of stabilize farmers' production throughout the year. They're also allowing farmers to move surface water, reducing drudgery of mostly women and children, and allowing access to water in the home, which, we're just kind of in a pandemic where access to water was so critical for hygiene and sanitation. And so that's also something else we're seeing when we talk to consumers, is that access to household water is really important, and solar water pumps are really making a move there. And all this put together is increasing farmers' livelihoods. When we interview consumers, they say that up to 80% of them say that their livelihoods have changed or become better, really, not just changed, become better because of having and owning a solar water pumps. Their living conditions and also increase the income from their farms is improving and increasing over time, which is fantastic. But if that's the case, why doesn't every every farmer in sub-Saharan Africa who needs a solar water pump have one? And I think for us, from our research, we see that it boils down to awareness and affordability. So when it comes to awareness, it's about not knowing the potential benefits, not understanding which pump is suitable for your farm, and even not knowing where to access a pump from, right? Not knowing which companies, like maybe they don't know Wala exists, for example, that they can access a pump from. So this is a really big challenge. And then, of course, the affordability piece. We're learning that solar water pumps are quite expensive. Sometimes they can be 100% of a farmer's gross annual income, which is probably the most expensive asset a sub-Saharan African farmer will own. And so that is an incredible lift for people who are mostly kind of really low income. And they don't always have access to credit to be able to then afford the pump. And then when they access the credit, which is great, they get the farm, we are also learning from our research that the pump is not an insular solution. It has to be viewed in context of other inputs that are necessary to make the whole ecosystem of the farm work. So you need weather information, you need information about what crops to grow, you need pricing on the market, how to do the best farm practices associated with the pump. And without all this information, you can't make the best use of the solar water pump, and therefore you might not get the yields or yield increases that you would expect as a farmer. And if you can't get the yield increases, then you can't pay back the loan you took to access the solar water pump, and then the whole system falls apart. So this access to the ecosystem, to enabling facilities that help you make the most use of the solar water pump is also something we're learning is crucially important. And so to put that all together is that we need models that are building on partnership. And I love how Priscilla put it, that, we just can't, it's not just about the pump. It's about all these other bits, the financing. It's about government extension services, private sector coming in as well to kind of offer repairability and maintenance. It's about getting the data, research data that tells you which pumps, where, for how much, and how to even structure that financing. And so we all have to kind of join together to have a data-led, holistic solution for solar water pumps, and not think of them in an insular way if we are going to get them to support smallholder farmers.
Thanks so much, McKenna. Okay, over to John Ehrman of Meridian Institute. So John, I know that Meridian Institute is involved in a number of projects, including the Just Rural Transition, and they really focus on the critical importance of treating all people justly and equitably as we make the needed transitions in how we produce our energy and food. Can you share some thoughts about how we can all contribute to achieving this goal in our work?
Yes, and first of all, thank you for the invitation to be part of this excellent panel and to be with all of you for this discussion. As Sari just noted, Meridian Institute, we're a nonprofit based in the U.S., but we do a lot of international work, and our focus is collaboration to solve challenging sustainability issues. So the issues that we're talking about here today are very much in the sweet spot, if you will, of where we've worked over the last 25 years. We actually had some behind-the-scenes assistance to the new alliance that was launched by IKEA and Rockefeller. And the Just Rural Transition effort that Sarah mentioned is funded by FCDO. It started about 9 months ago, and it is focused on ensuring that transitions related to agriculture, as they relate to policy, technology, response to climate change, et cetera, are done in ways that engage and empower all the participants in the system. And that's, of course, where the just comes from, the Just Rural Transition title of the effort. So we are very focused on a lot of the themes that my colleagues have already touched on, and I'll just emphasize a couple. I mean, first, and the last speaker really spent time on this very well, I think, is awareness and access. So we can have wonderful technological solutions that tie together the need to address climate change, that address the need for new food models, new nutrition, and all the aspects that go into healthy agriculture as we now understand healthy agriculture. But people need to be aware of those innovations. They need access to the information to be aware, and then they need the resources to be able to access the technology. One piece that I haven't heard a lot yet, but I know it's implicit, but I want to make it explicit, is engagement. too often when technology is presented to people wherever they are in whatever system, it comes in as a bit of a fait accompli. Oh, this is a really great thing. You need to do this. This is how you need to implement it. This is how you need to apply it. Let us build your capacity. But it's a one-way communication. And I think one of the things that we're trying to reach out very in appropriate ways to farmer groups, smallholder groups, smallholders themselves, workers, so that they are part of a collaborative building of the social, if you will, capacity and infrastructure that's necessary to implement the solutions that we're talking about here. And I know I'm sure all my colleagues agree with that, but it's just something that we sometimes rush by. And quite frankly, we need collectively new models, new ways of doing that, which fundamentally have to start with a conversation and with a level outreach and finding out what problems people have, what their challenges are, what their needs are, and then work in collaboration to build these approaches that we're talking about together. And that then will build the trust for long-lasting implementation and engagement to solve the problems we're trying to solve. So I'll stop there right now. Thanks.
Thanks so much, John. Eduarda, you've been doing a lot of work to engage young people in clean energy access, and earlier this year you organized the SE for All Youth Summit to provide a platform for young people across the globe to engage, connect, and learn about SDG 7. Why are efforts like these so important in helping to drive innovation in energy and agriculture?
Okay. I don't know, is it working? Yeah. Okay. So first, thank you for having me. As you said, I'm here representing youth, but also women in the energy sector. And also specifically student energy. And until recently, I was working for SE for All, Sustainable Energy for All, which is an international organization that works to achieve the SDG 7. And we organized this year the first ever youth summit, which was a very important, I think, milestone for the organization to gather young people from all parts of the world. And even though it was online, we had more than 1,000 members from different countries that were engaged, and our objectives were to educate youth, learn about the projects that they were doing, and also raise awareness to SDG 7, because I think most of us, not only young people, we understand the SDG 7 as renewable energy. We forget that there are commitments related to clean cooking, that there are commitments related to energy efficiency. And even in terms of entrepreneurship, young people are more engaged with renewable energy deployment. So one thing that was very interesting was that we launched a competition, and we received more than 200 applications from youth from all possible countries, all regions. And the winner was actually a project that was about cold supply chains, and the group was a Nigerian group that was proposing to have solar-based coolers for COVID-19 vaccines in the country. So this is just to show that, imagine a group of young people that have already created this, but no one knows about. So I think that these initiatives and these events want to show everyone how much there is, how much potential there is for young people. And just to bring another example, I'm from Brazil, and one of my best friends, who's also in the energy sector, he created a small metering technology that you can bring to households, and people understand how much their refrigerator are demanding energy, how much, a microwave consumes energy. And he was saying that one of his objectives with that was raising awareness, because the most important thing is showing the consumers why their electricity bills are so important. And again, these are coming from people who are under 30, who are still in college, and it's important to have us all at the table, but also being engaged in the process of enabling energy access, because by facing these problems, by being, the youth in rural communities or the indigenous youth, we understand what our communities need, and it will be better for us to find solutions from the bottom up. So, and then finally, just one last call to action is to investors most times say that investing in emerging markets, there are huge risks associated to it. But if you think about youth innovation, these projects require so little funding. And when we talk about US dollars, what that can bring in local currency is an enormous amount of investment that can change someone's life, and that then you can foster innovative solutions from youth. So yeah.
Thanks so much, Eduardo. A really great rallying call for action. Okay, now I'm going to open the floor for questions for our panelists from our audience members in person and online. If you're watching the event online, please submit your questions during the chat box on Gigabox. If you're in person, please raise your hand and one of my colleagues will come to you with a roaming mic. And I think you raised your hand. And could I please ask all audience members to, when they're asking a question, to please state your full name and affiliation, and please keep your questions concise and phrased as questions, not statements.
Hello, hi. I'm Neil Walmsley from Climate Kick, and over the last few years we've been doing very similar sorts of program across Asia, Africa, and Latin America, and particularly with support of UK Aid and others, some of whom are in this room, so very grateful to them. My question is this: one of the things that we've experienced is that we've found it relatively straightforward in some respects to support individual solutions to help them develop, grow and scale, and that isn't really so much of a problem. But the challenge we have is very much around how do you create the enabling environment, which is a common issue that's coming up from the panel, that allows it to keep growing and scaling without your direct intervention on a regular basis. And one of the things that we've been focusing on developing is around innovation clusters at a city region level, where you city region innovation clusters, where you bring the different key players together, the investors, the accelerators, the government officials and so forth. I just wanted to get a view from the audience in terms of whether they had much experience of engaging at that kind of level, whether they have found it effective. We've certainly found it effective in Europe, which we do with the European Union, but whether in this environment that is an effective approach or not. Thanks.
Thanks so much for that question. Martin, would you like to take that about fostering innovations?
Sure, I can try to come to an answer. I think what the speakers also have been saying, there's many moving parts to get adoption, is what you say, adoption of those technologies at scale. And when you talk about enabling environment conditions, it's a lot. It's policies, regulations, it's finance, access to finance for the companies, but also for the end users. To me, honestly, and that's maybe also one of those things that we need to put out there. We're talking a lot about productive use of energy solutions. They need to be productive. Yeah, it's energy. It should be climate change mitigation. Should be adaptation. Often we're preaching to the converted. I want to have a call then here to have more emphasis on the use. We're talking productive use of energy. It reflects also a bit to what the colleagues were saying here. Like, we need to really look, where is the demand? Where are the needs? What are the people asking for? Because I have an energy background and I work a lot with businesses. And I'm very enthusiastic about everything that's on the market. It's amazing what has been done the past couple of years with companies that have innovated on technologies, on business models, also on financing modalities with pay-as-you-go, getting to scale. It's amazing, but it's still on the supply side. As you also said, many people don't know, are not aware. And if they're aware, then there's the affordability issue. And that's the biggest thing to me. People cannot pay in a lot of cases for those solutions. And that's really the key bottleneck we need to address. If we want to get usage of those technologies, you need to address the affordability and listen to the farmers what they need. We're often being accused to think in silos from the energy sector. I can tell you the same happens in the agriculture sector. And I experience that from close by because we work on those nexus solutions. I can tell you a lot of the solutions that we're aiming for, they don't work in particular value chains. If I talk to an agronomist or an agribusiness advisor that is working on oilseeds, I can pitch anything I want on solar-powered pumps, but there's no business case. Not for the farmer, not for the cooperative, not for the agribusiness. It's different for horticulture. It's different also for dairy, with cooling. Different solutions will not work everywhere. Final point on this, if you allow me to close. I visited a farmer in Kenya and doing solar water pumping. It's a great technology. We know the company. It's working very well. Why is it working? Why did the farmer invest in that technology? Not because he was focusing on a particular value chain, not because he was so interested in climate change mitigation or adaptation. He actually saw the added value at a farm system level. He is applying that irrigation instrument for all of his crops, for the fishing ponds, for the reservoirs. While we were there, a neighbor came by, can I borrow it? Because it was a bit of promotion then, Future Pump. It's a small system that you can actually transport. Why is then the business model viable for the farmer? Because of that flexibility in addressing the needs of that particular farmer and his neighbors. And then the business case is there, demand goes up and sales will go up and we will see more productive use, but that's so context specific. That's just the comment I wanted to make.
Thank you so much for that. Over to you.
Hi, I'm Alan Bigelow from Solar Cookers International. Thank you for everything you've said, the panelists. Eduardo, thank you for mentioning clean cooking. That's absolutely important in all of this. At Solar Cookers International, we promote solar cooking, but also solar drying in areas just like we've been mentioning today in East Africa and in Kenya. We have a large project. And I wanted to ask a particular question, and it's addressing the affordability, I believe, and that is about local production of the products. If things can be made in the country, then as you know, the prices will come down very quickly. Nothing's being shipped, nothing's coming in from outside. And I would like to ask, we didn't hear much about the specific technologies that are being used in the term of solar-powered appliances for agriculture. And the solar dryer has a tremendous opportunity for farmers to be placed on site and also to be used on site for value addition. I understand that at a larger scale, these can be hybrid systems, and thinking about the big picture of hybridness to incorporate perhaps solar water pumps, dryers, solar dryers. I would like to just know if you are using some of these products that are locally produced, and if not, we would be happy to partner and join, and especially on some of our best practices with awareness raising campaigns. We have some really good material that we would like to share. Okay, so what are you using in terms of local production?
I can take it, but I already spoke a lot, so I would prefer somebody else to come in.
Jeff, would you like to reflect on that quickly?
Sure. Well, thank you, first of all, for the suggestion to connect. We'll do that later. I think for me, can you hear me? Yeah. For me, the big example of local production is India, basically. So we work with Selco Foundation. Surubi is here if you want to talk to her about it. But basically, there's a pretty strong small and medium enterprise activity looking at these productive use renewable energy technologies. What you often see is, for example, there might be a rice huller or a miller. It's a technology basically from the 19th century. And now you're starting to see, because of efficiency boosts and the possibility of solar, you'll see a solar miller processor huller for about $1,000 that can do the same as a big diesel genset operation. So you see a lot of innovation there, and it's locally embedded. And that's great, because I think often we think either arrogantly or naively that there's this flashy technology, the end user will want it. But the end user is often solving their energy needs, right? Through local, small and medium enterprises, very close by. It's not the flashy, big scale that we all talk about, but it's serving their needs. efficiency plus solar is a game changer because it brings these assets to their doorstep and in their possession. And I think that's key because obviously they're solving their energy needs. They don't really need us, but they need the ecosystem to be activated. And this is one key point. The ecosystem doesn't start with something flashy from Europe or US, but it starts with the end user. And you have to solve other barriers like financing, market linkages, good policy, skills development. You know, there's a lot of talent out there, but they just didn't get the chances to develop. They're willing to work in solar sector. We've worked through Celco Foundation with Don Bosco, for example, to create that vocational training. There are inventors, so there's plenty to do with local talent and local organizations.
Thanks so much for that, Jeff. I'm now going to come to another two perspectives and before moving on to the next question. Eduardo, would you like to take that question?
No, I just wanted to make two quick comments, if I may. First, about thinking about localizing these value chains is very important. And at SE for All, we were developing a study that is actually, I think, ready by now to show that in terms of providing off-grid electrification through solar energy, instead of importing all products, you actually have a huge potential for assembling the materials because some of those components you can find locally. So it is possible, and there is a huge cost benefit for the population in terms of generating employment and also not having to highly depend on taxes for importing different materials. So this is something that should be, I think, more feasibility studies and more analysis for different countries in terms of the solar value chain should be done. And then just to the point of which technologies work or not in the field. I spent some time in Kenya as well. And one thing that was very interesting for me to see was that in different villages where I stayed, people were very used to biogas. So they were all cooking with biogas. And I asked, I've never seen like how this works, and they all had anaerobic digesters, and they showed me a kitchen like in the middle of nowhere that was like a really nice kitchen that was completely abandoned, and I was like, what is that? And they were like, this was a donation from an ex-developed country from a bilateral partnership, but we never used it because we don't know how you should use it. So again, just coming back to the point of bottom-up solutions are very important. And then sometimes they're very simple, sometimes they're not expensive, and the population adopts it because it's something that makes sense for them, to use waste to generate energy.
Thanks so much, Eduarda. McKenna, I wanted to come to you to respond to that question as well.
Thanks. Actually, I also want to just say a quick one on the enabling environment, because this is a big issue. I think enabling environment is mostly influenced by policy, and policy is influenced by government. So I get so frustrated when I see companies coming in and really not engaging government, either at local level or national level, when they're trying to, promote any kind of appliance, and then assuming that somehow they will just solve that tiny solution and then enabling environment will take care of itself. So I think that's super important. And then also working with local companies, funding local companies. They've already existed in that environment. They understand how to work with the existing environment and to make it work for them and where their pinch points are. So, foreign companies should partner with local companies. Local companies should get way more funding because they already kind of understand how to build out in the existing enabling environment. So that's just one call. And then in the other question about how to encourage local production, or what we're doing about local production. It's true that there isn't enough going on. A lot of technology is being imported in, some of it being assembled in countries. For example, Clean Cooks was assembled in Kenya by Ban Manufacturing, which is fantastic. And that does lower the cost, as was rightly asked mentioned by the speaker. But I think we need to do more. So for example, at E4A, we are already kicking off a study about how to promote local production, local assembly, using case studies of those people who are already trying at least to do some of the assembly parts within the country, and trying to show what are the levers that you can pull and what are the key things that you need to think about to enhance that local production. And again, I'll come back to governments, because even with that, government policy that is really open to business, open to local manufacturing, and encouraging that will also be really important, not just for this sector, not just for solar appliances, but for all sectors really. So yeah, that's it from me. Thanks.
Thanks so much, McKenna. I'd like to take another question, and are there any women in the room who would like to ask a question? Over to you. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Jen Abdella. I'm with the Near East Foundation. We work, much like SNV, with producer communities, smallholders. And I wondered, in your development and approach to sort of adoption of these systems, if you've also been looking at the, not the supply side, but the demand side business model. So collective, cooperative, sort of how do you not only obtain the technology, but maintain it, operate it? Sort of, has that been part of your calculus in terms of the work that you're doing? And have you found models that were particularly promising, or is it also locally context driven that it really shifts based on that?
Oh, great question, and it ties into something I was thinking about as others were responding to some of the earlier questions. I think in our view, technology does not disseminate technology. People disseminate technology. And I'm a big believer in something that I call the transitive property of trust. So if I trust you and you trust him, then we can kind of speed up the dissemination process. And that's a lot of what happens in a co-op structure. So I think it's really important, and I would also point to my colleague here on my right, youth, about disseminating information and ideas through social networks and this trust-to-trust relationship. So I think it's important, in addition to everything else we're saying about financing and new technology and experimenting and getting it on the ground and showing people it works, absolutely vital. But another piece of the recipe is, anytime you're thinking about dissemination in a vertical way, look horizontally, because we don't do that very well, right? We do operate in silos, and we don't think about the way social networks, and by that I mean people networks, not just electronic social networks, work. You're more likely to adopt something, and you mentioned it just a minute ago. The neighbor came by and said, oh, that's a neat pump, I want to use it. Well, it wasn't the pump that reassured the neighbor, it was the neighbor that reassured the neighbor. The pump was just a good tool to have that became the opportunity. So I think in our work, we've done some work with cocoa in Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, et cetera, and the use of co-ops to disseminate agroforestry models, et cetera. We do a lot of work in that realm. That's a very powerful way of organizing people to build that. But implicit in a co-op is these individuals trust each other, and you can quickly hasten the pace of technological dissemination. And youth are a powerful way, and we need to keep youth, if you will, in the rural landscape and understanding that this is a lifestyle that has a lot of values to it. And if they can get excited about some of this new technology applying to what has been a traditional, quote, way of life, that's a very powerful combination.
Thanks so much for that response, John. I wanted to come to Priscilla to answer that question, to bring a local perspective and reflecting on the work that you're doing in Malawi. Over to you. Okay. We'll come to her at another point. Are there any other questions? A reminder, if you're joining us on Gigabox, please write your question in the chat box, and one of my colleagues will transmit that to me. Do we have any more questions from people in the room? Over to you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Surabhi from Selco Foundation. I think Martin mentioned this about agri organizations also working in silos, and I just wanted to understand your experience of working across sectors with institutions that work on livelihoods and agriculture, and what do we expect from them? What do we want from them if we want to bring in these solutions to the communities that they work with?
Yeah, great question, and let me link that also to the previous question, actually. Because what we have seen, for example, biodigesters was also mentioned as an interesting example. It's a technology, yes, it's a technology, but it's a beautiful technology. It's creating access to energy. At the same time, it has this liquid leftover called bioslurry, which is a very potent organic fertilizer. So you have actually a product that combines energy and productive use for agriculture and sanitation, because you connect toilets. It's amazing. It's an amazing technology, but it's expensive. It's from $600 to $1,000, yeah, roughly, depending per country, and it's locally produced, by the way. Those are local enterprises doing it, the installations, the after-sales service, the maintenance, etc. And we build the capacity of those companies, and it's expanding. Now, how do you promote that? Yeah, how do you get communities to accept to adopt those? What you need for the biodigesters is dung from cattle, mostly, and then other organic waste. So obviously you're looking at dairy farmers as the first target group. So obviously for promotion you look at farmers associations of dairy farmers and women groups and others that have a way of disseminating those messages. And it's indeed true what the colleague said. It's not the technology itself that convinces, it's the technology that works and that the farmer shows. I'm a very bad promoter, honestly. I've tried to do it with biogas, with clean cooking, but people don't relate to me so much. I'm not a farmer in Ethiopia, for example. If they hear from your neighboring farmer, like, guys, I bought this thing, and I must tell you, it's quite amazing, look. And they show that is what sells. It's people who sell, and it's people that relate to the people that have that demand. And that indeed is then also breaking silos, because we're not working through, not so much through energy associations in promoting those solutions, honestly, because they don't have that outreach to farmers or to community-based organizations or women groups. Those are other organizations, so you need to break those silos. And it's what we try to do.
Thanks so much for that, Martin. I want to go back to Priscilla, but to respond to the previous question and reflect on some of her work in Malawi. Over to you, Priscilla.
Sorry about that technology. You can hear me fine, right? Okay, good. Yeah, so just to respond to the question about some of the models that are working. So what I was saying before is, as well, in Malawi, what we're doing is we're piloting a holistic model that basically tries to address a lot of the gaps in the ecosystem around the farmer. So as a business, our focus would be to sell the equipment, because that would be the major avenue of generating revenue. But we recognize that there are all of these other gaps, that all of these other challenges that the farmers face. So things like access to markets, things like capacity, knowing how to use the equipment properly, knowing how to do farming as a business, knowing how to do good agricultural practice. Things like access to funding to buy the equipment itself, where most of them would not be able to afford the equipment up front. So the model that is working for us is approaching that as a holistic thing, rather than just looking at the one aspect that brings us revenue, that gives us money, but trying to bring partnerships to the table that then fill the other gaps that actually enable us to generate that revenue. Because if we just have a really good product that we're bringing to market that the farmers can't afford, no one is going to buy it. If we're selling this equipment to the farmer and they're not able to use it properly, it breaks after a week, then we have a lot of warranty issues. If they're buying the equipment but they don't know how to do farming as a business, then it's business as usual, that they're just growing crops that for subsistence, maize essentially, which is a low value crop that they just use to feed themselves. So what we're doing is approaching it as a holistic thing. And a lot of speakers have mentioned today about the ecosystem as a whole. And as a business, as a social enterprise, it's not possible for us to fill all of the gaps to be that entire ecosystem. But there are players in the ecosystem that we can partner with that can fill those gaps for us. And we do this in a way that then makes sure that everybody around the table wins, that you highlight what are the benefits for a financing partner coming to the table and offering credit, offering loans to our farmers. What are the benefits of an off-taker coming to the table and giving these farmers an upfront contract that they're able to secure a market before they grow the crop? What are the benefits of an institution? I had not mentioned this before. The one that is supporting us in terms of the trainings is GIZ. What is the benefit to GIZ for partnering with us and training our staff to train farmers to be able to do farming as a business, to be able to do good agricultural practice? Everybody can win. So for us, what is working, and sort of to touch briefly on what was mentioned before about the ecosystem as a whole, what we're seeing is that if you bring everybody to the table and it's clear what the wins are, then everybody is willing to contribute. And as a business, we're actually then able to generate the revenue that we need to be able to support the farmers with products that they need, that they normally wouldn't afford, but in a way that actually works for them, using terms that actually work for them, that are realistic based on their reality on the ground. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks so much for that, Priscilla. Okay, to round off the question and answer portion of the session today, if there are no further questions from the audience, I wanted to ask a quick question of all of my panelists. Could you please sum up in one sentence what governments can do to help scale the use of solar-powered technologies that can help enhance the livelihoods of smallholder farmers? Rebecca, I'd like to start with you.
Sure, thanks for that question. I think it just really goes back to the ecosystem conversation. I think that there are, tax deductions that governments can implement. There are policy changes. There are simply, public awareness campaigns. Those are some very, very basic but really, really high impact things that governments can do in order to move this forward. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks so much, Rebecca. Jeff, I'll come to you next.
So I think the best thing is for governments to really set the frameworks that can serve the end user and create a system that works for the end user. So a lot of times we're all focused on making things work for a technology or for a bank, a financial institution, but if governments can make things line up for the end user, that the system works for the end user, I think that would be amazing.
Thanks so much for that, Jeff. John, over to you.
I think the key role for government is making sure that they understand the perverse implications of subsidies in the systems that they support, and moving away from subsidies that reinforce bad practice to financing that reinforces the kind of good practices we're talking about here. And that's particularly true in the world of agriculture.
Thanks so much, John. Eduardo, over to you.
For me, governments have to build capacity. They have to go to these places. And when I say go to these places, we don't need the governor himself, the mayor himself to go there, but the team has to go there, and they usually don't. We're talking about solutions here that, once again, from the bottom up, even nationals, even people from that same country, and I say this, my country is a huge country, the government doesn't know what happens in rural areas. They don't even have the means to get there. And you have to get there. You have to have data. You have to understand, as we've been talking here, if you want them for the solution to be have a multiplier effect, people have to understand why that's important. And you have to go to rural areas in order to make it happen.
Thanks, Eduardo. Martin, over to you.
Yeah, I can only add to that. It's really, for me, first of all, governments realize that huge potential that those solutions have to increase production, to increase incomes, to generate employment, also for youth, and all kinds of local initiatives. And with that, to improve livelihood conditions. Once that realization is there, on that huge potential, also for climate change adaptation and mitigation, all of that, I mean, it should be an important part of agendas of governments, and with that then come to the right mechanisms that you need, including financial mechanisms that really allow farmers to invest in that in smart ways. It should be indeed sustainable investments, but it should be structured in a way that it's still accessible also for those smallholder farmers. It's not easy, but it's possible.
Thanks, Martin. Priscilla, over to you for a response.
Thanks. I'll give an example of what the government is already doing in Malawi, and this links to something that Rebecca mentioned briefly. So for Malawi, what the government has done is they have made solar technologies, all solar technologies that are related to agriculture. They're VAT-free, they're tax-free. And what that means is that when our products come in, literally the only thing that we have to pay to the Malawi Revenue Authority is the handling fee, which is really, really low. And what that has done is it has enabled us to pass that reduced price on to the end user. Normally the VAT or the tax would be about 30 or 40% of the equipment. It would make us increase the price by about that much. But because that is not there, then the price to the end user, to the farmer, is able to be about 30 to 40% lower than it normally would be. So this is something that we are experiencing directly, and we know is definitely working. And it's something that I would encourage other governments and other countries to do, especially for countries in Africa. It's very, very, very helpful. Thanks.
Thanks, Priscilla. And McKenna, over to you.
I think governments have to create the conditions for success. And I'll give an example of Nigeria, where they've added fish into the banned list of products that use foreign exchange, right, to transact. And what that has done is force local fish production, which will need cold storage facilities, which then, we're talking about solar appliances being used for productive use. So the government has to just set the conditions for success, whether that's putting it in the agenda, the agricultural ministry's agenda, and also creating the right global ecosystem within the country to make sure that we can succeed.
Thanks so much to McKenna. Thanks to you all so much for attending Efficiency for Access, ICF and IEA's live Q&A, and a big, big thank you goes to our guest panelists online, our guest panelists in the room for sharing their knowledge, insights on how solar-powered agricultural technologies can help empower smallholder farmers. It's been fantastic to hear such a diversity of perspectives, from really leading foundations in the area to a youth perspective to a really exciting social enterprise working in Malawi, research. We heard about the importance of bottom-up solutions, the really crucial role that government can play, and also a look to the future and some insights in how we can empower young people, both collectively and individually, to make a really important contribution to the energy and agriculture nexus. So we're now going to move into the mingling portion of our event, where people in the room can engage with our speakers, ask any further questions of them. So at this point, I'll say thank you again to our online panelists, McKenna, Priscilla, and Rebecca, and see you soon. Thanks, everyone.